where they're going to put them. This is Agenda 21, human settlement zones. As you saw, it's in their own documents. What they want to do is concentrate the masses in high-rise, ultra tiny boxes where they can be under surveillance 24/7. And it's happening now. Like I say, this is the structure they want, and they want a world of regions. They want to break up countries into regions. And this Rockefeller organization, America 2050, this is when they want all the stuff finished and in, is breaking up in their wish list America into mega regions, exactly in line with this Hunger Games movie map. And the European Union is doing the same. This is a map of regions they are suggesting should be created in Europe as countries cease to be. And in these mega regions, they want mega cities, where, like I say, this is David Dees, a great political artist out of America, and this image really sums up what they want. They want an end to people having access to cars who aren't in the elite. Now, this is what they mean. Recently, last few years, when Mayor Bloomberg was mayor of New York, they started a project to build 165,000 units for people in New York. And these yellow lines are the size of the units. They are 10 feet by 30. And this is absolutely in line with Agenda 21. This is the 165,000 units, while he, elite, has massive properties all over the world. Here, Agenda 21, city officials, developers recommend coffin apartments for middle class. Coming everywhere. Rabbit Hutch Britain, growing health concerns as UK sets record for smallest properties in Europe. They're moving towards it. Soaring house prices will kill off middle class within 30 years, Britain to be left with tiny elite and sprawling proletariat. Abolition of private property. They also want to take people out of cars by making it too expensive for the masses to have cars and run cars. And like I say, it's all being coordinated through this network. Now, if you look at the Hunger Games movie, the mode of transport was high-speed rail. And what they want in this Hunger Games society is the main source of transport to be railways and high-speed rail, because it's easier to control people that way. And it's interesting that if you look at this mega region, mega cities map of America 2050, since the invention of the airplane, American railways have been going down and down and down and down. They've just been left to rot, basically. And then suddenly, in the last few years under Obama, enormous amounts of investment have been made into building high-speed railways across America. And when you take that map and then you put the high-speed rail map of America and the list of years they want to introduce it, it absolutely fits over that mega regions, mega cities map. This is what we're seeing in this country and throughout Europe, the building of these high-speed rail systems in line with Agenda 21. And I know for an absolute fact that some of the people who are doing it under being railway executives actually work for NATO. So then is Archon food. All these things are connected. I'm connecting dots here. All these different things which people oppose and protest against are actually all different expressions of the same conspiracy. There is a war on the human body. There's a war on human health. Now, the Fabian Society was called the Fabian Society after a Roman general called Fabius. And his claim to fame was never to engage in a battle which could lead to a win or a loss, which could be decisive. His way of doing it was to weaken the enemy over a long period of time until they were so weak that you just walked in. This is what is happening in terms of human health and many other things. They are systematically weakening the target population so we become so weak that they just walk in and do what they like. And fundamental to that is the war on human health. Here we go, weapon of mass destruction. GMO, genetically modified food designed to genetically modify us. This guy, David Suzuki, a geneticist, any politician or scientist who tells you that these GMO products are safe is either very stupid or lying. Most of the food chain now in America, overwhelming majority of the food chain in America is infested with GMO, and they're trying to do everything they can to bring it in Europe by stages. And this is how they do it. Here he is, Michael Taylor, an executive of Monsanto who moves over to be the food czar for Obama. And he's moved through that revolving door a number of times. What he does, he works for Monsanto and then he goes into government. He should be policing Monsanto, but what he's doing is introducing Monsanto's agenda in government. Here's Bill again. 500,000 shares in Monsanto. He owns the most evil company on earth. And he says he wants to make the world a better place. I don't believe you. This is the GMO scam. You will eat what we tell you to eat. Got it. This is why all this systematic contamination is going on. And here we're dealing with a force that I was talking about through the day that is about mutating the species so we decode reality in a different way. And all these GMO products, they need these poisons to go with them. And what happens next? You eat it. And it's part of this war on the human organism, the human health, to weaken it. I mean, you would think on the face of it that it's madness to do this. But there's method in the madness of those who know why it's being done. Monsanto's darkest secret, Roundup's effect on the fetus. Get the baby before it's even born. Look at this. Paint thinner in children's cereal exposed. It's bloody madness, unless you know the agenda and what it's designed to do. Here are McDonald's, shit in any bloody language. There you go. All this fast food is part of this war on the human organism. And junk food can be as addictive as heroin, and this is why. The receptors of the cells that accept heroin and cocaine and all that stuff also are receptors of the shite chemicals and concoctions that come out of shite chemically infested food, and therefore the body can become addicted to those chemicals. So what they're doing, the GMO, is they're forcing out of existence opposition to GMO so everything can be genetically modified. Genetically modifying the planet. That's what they're doing. And the reason that you get this war again on food supplements and alternative ways of giving nutrition to the body, which they're not getting from the food, the reason there's a war on all that and regulation on all that is to stop people having any other way of overcoming this war on the human body to get nutrition from another source. Archon Big Pharma, this goes on from there, same thing. You look at these big pharma companies, they lock into the same bloody network. Vaccines. If you want access to the body to devastate the human immune system from an early age, so you make children for life open to things their immune system in a healthy state would suss, then vaccines are your dream come true. The immune system, when it's strong, you're healthy. When it's weak, you're ill. When it's knackered, you're dead. And this is the focal point of the war on the human organism, a war on the human immune system. All these vaccinations that kids have before the age of 6, because it's systematically targeting the health of young people so they'll never be healthy for the rest of their life. is the first step of denying any access whatsoever into wilderness areas, which is exactly the plan of Agenda 21. And they're destroying community food gardens. This is in Canada. And what they're doing, they're changing the zoning laws to say you can't grow food there, even though people are hungry, and they're communally growing to help each other out. Allotments are going under. Food and Drug Administration in America to ban organic farming, ? They're doing these raids on organic farming communities to bring about the end and Agenda 21. And this is Dr. Richard Day, again, 1969. Growing food will be banned by saying it isn't safe, and the state and corporations will control all food production. The supply and distribution of food will be monitored so that no one can give food to a fugitive of the system. That's what's unfolding. In 1913, corn is 100% farmer-owned. 2013, corn is 95% owned by corporations, and 90% in the United States is genetically modified. Kissinger, control oil and you control nations, control food and you control the people. This is what it's about. And the same is happening to water, again under Agenda 21. These corporations are buying up all the water sources. This fricking idiot, the CEO of Nestle, is saying water is not a human right. Excuse me, mate, if you don't get access to it, you fricking die. Oh, that's what you want. Sorry, I gotcha. Water is not a human right and should be privatized. US court ends private property rights, all water to be controlled by government. See, all over the world, because of this global network, it's unfolding. Control the water and you control the people. And so what they're doing under Agenda 21, and America is the primest example, is they're just not funding rural communities. They're not funding rural schools. They're not mending rural roads. They're actually digging up a lot of rural roads, to make life impossible, to get people off the land. America 2050 is an organization funded by the Rockefellers. It's a Rockefeller front organization. The Agenda 21 depopulation of rural areas has begun. It's everywhere. Irish councils plan trying to strip people of right to live in the countryside. And you know when this guy came in, bloody Blair Mark II, never said it in the election campaign, suddenly announced he's going to sell off all the forests. Do you remember that? Going to sell off all the forests. What do you mean? You never mentioned that. That was Agenda 21. And he was stopped from doing it en masse because of the opposition. Not from the Green Party, by the way, which is shocking. Get them off the land, weather control. Now, this is a big area where people get scammed because they don't think that is possible, manipulating the weather to create extremes of weather to get people into situations that remove them from the land. But actually, Dr. Richard Day was actually a weather manipulator during the Second World War. Get them off the land. And here he is again. Here's Bill. He's involved in the Fund for what is Climate Change and Energy Research. What it is manipulating the climate, justified by saving the world from climate change. But what it is manipulating the weather. And it's been going on. People say it's not possible. Of course it's possible. It's happening. It goes way back. Even a BBC radio documentary exposed a few years ago that the Lynmouth flood in 1952, which killed people and devastated that village in Devon, was actually created by the RAF, who were doing an operation called Operation Cumulus, also known as Operation Witch Doctor, in which they were putting sulfur into the atmosphere above this, in this area. And actually people before the massive flood say they kind of tasted and smelt sulfur in the air. And what it did was create an enormous rainstorm, which created the flood, which created the Lynmouth disaster, 1952. This is 1996, an official US Air Force document describing the artificial creation of floods, hurricanes, droughts, and earthquakes. And it continues, weather modification will become a part of domestic and international security and could be done unilaterally. It could have offensive or defensive applications and even be used for deterrence purposes. The ability to generate precipitation, fog, and storms on Earth or to modify space weather and the production of artificial weather are all part of an integrated set of military technologies. They are manipulating the weather like crazy. And one of the ways they do it is this operation in Alaska called HAARP, which fires high-power radio waves from into the ionosphere and has weather effects. But it's not just HAARP. They're building these things around the world now. And the chemtrails are interconnected with that. There you go. Don't worry, just a lot of flying tonight. All these chemtrails, it's just your imagination. And the reason they link into weather control is this, from a document or an article. Dispersed metallic particles such as aluminium, barium, and strontium, the main chemtrail ingredients, may increase the atmosphere's conductivity and therefore enhance HAARP's weather modification performance. That's just one reason for them. There are many others too. Now, we've had these extremes of weather, floods and in America, catastrophic for small farms and even less than small farms in America. Droughts. And the explanation of them is the jet stream is acting strangely. This is the main kind of weather pattern that comes across America and across Britain into Europe. This guy, Bernard Eastland, who wrote many of the patents for the HAARP project, said that HAARP can steer the jet stream. And like I say, when we have these extremes of weather, which are devastating for farmers and people in countryside areas, they say it's because the jet stream has moved from where it normally is, and thus they create these weather extremes. And this is what Dr. Richard Day said in 1969. The weather will be modified and used as a weapon of war to create drought or famine. This is in Britain. This is in America. Here's a story from very recently. Farmer who lost 800 acres of land during last winter's flood is refused compensation after he was told the aerial picture of devastation was insufficient bloody evidence. And then in America, in recent years, they've had catastrophic droughts. It's a catastrophic one and then some in California at the moment and through this summer. This is the one in 2012. That's the area of extreme drought. And here's a story from this week. 14 California communities now on verge of having no water. Mass migration out of California seems imminent. And it's a doddle to keep the rain away, and it's a doddle to make it come in massive quantities. And what is happening as these people are forced off the land through all these things? The major corporations are buying up that land in massive, massive quantities. Get them off the land, fracking. Well, amazing. A red flag and a flashing red light should always start when something comes out of nowhere and it's suddenly everywhere. Suddenly, fracking, what's happening? It's every bloody where. Countries all over the world are having fracking protests. Where did that come from? Because it's the agenda pressing the button for this stage called fracking. Here we go. Farmers fear fracking could spell financial ruin. They're now letting people in this country drill under their bloody homes, put whatever they like under their bloody homes without any oversight. And what the fracking is, I mean, you know, you say, look, I'm sure you didn't get that right. Explain it to me again, because that's madness, okay? That's madness, right? So just explain it again. Well, what they're doing is they're forcing at high power water full of hundreds of chemicals into the ground. They're breaking up the structure to get to this stuff they want, this gas or whatever, shale gas. And they're causing earthquakes because they're breaking up the structure. And then all these chemicals are going into the groundwater supply, and we're supposed to frickin' drink it. That is the astonishing story of fracking. And when governments, in the face of such unbelievable nonsense, still push on with it, it's the agenda. 630 chemicals they're putting in this stuff, going into the groundwater supplies. Look at it. And when you can't get access to clean water, what do? You have to leave the land to find a place where you can get access to clean water. Control the water and you control the people. And here's Report states fracking can cause earthquakes on faults tens of miles from the fracking boreholes. Look at this. This is Oklahoma, 2009, 38 earthquakes. 2014, 780 and counting. Oh, fracking's nothing to do with it. Yeah, but you started fracking here. Cobra. There's the cobra coming out of what? The third eye. The Druids used to worship a serpent god called Hu. And this is the Nagas, a reptilian race in Asia that they said could take either human or reptilian form. Or there's the Mayan people. They worship the serpent god Kukulkan. And the folklore describes, of course, dragons and serpents. Then you've got the fairy stories of the prince turning into a frog, the frog turning into a prince. And what they call these reptilian bloodlines, which I'm going to come to, are the royal bloodlines, because they are the bloodlines of the gods. And of course, in the East, the dragon is a massive central point in their imagery. You find around the world this theme of part serpent, part human, all over the place, the duality of them. And this is another common thing that you find, the serpent eating a human or eating a human baby, all over the place, all over the world. And you see it on Alfa Romeo even. And note the crown. Note how often the crown is used, because these are considered royal bloodlines, these particular serpent or archontic human bloodlines, which I'm going to come to. And when you look at the Hollywood and televisual portrayals around the world of non-human entities in reptilian form, they are incredibly the same or very, very similar to what people have described who've interacted with these entities. They worshipped the fish gods, as they called them in the ancient world, with the scales. And the fish god priests used to wear a hat like that because it was a fish head. And all the way through, this same theme has come into the Roman church, into the Christian church. And there you see the mitre, the fish head, the same as the worship of the fish gods in the ancient world. And there you see it in this country as well. So what you're looking at is secret societies. They worship a certain force, a certain god. You get religion. They're worshipping a certain god. They think they're different gods, but actually it's the same gods. And then you get Satanism. And at the level of Satanism, they are more knowingly worshipping the archontic satanic gods. But in the end, all these different forms, although the vast majority of them have no idea that's the case, are ultimately worshipping this force with tremendous implications that I'll come to. So, I mentioned these bloodlines. This archontic force does not operate in this dimension in the sense that this is not its frequency. So if it wants to pull it to be its frequency, but it can't be its frequency at the moment. So it needs a vehicle within visible light to work on its behalf while it works from the hidden. And so certain bloodlines were created specifically to be that vehicle. Human, archontic, human, reptilian hybrids. And you see the symbols of them with the number of times you see reptilian imagery in the coats of arms of the aristocracy and stuff. Of course, the City of London, the financial district, which is massively involved in the global conspiracy, also has tremendous reptilian imagery. Now, these bloodlines are like the in-betweeners, if you like. You've got the visible light frequency band, and you've got the entities outside of the band. These are the representatives within this frequency which can interact with this frequency and do the bidding of this hidden force. And like I say, it's like the scientist who can't work inside a tank with something that's dangerous, so he puts the gloves on and works from outside the tank and works in it through the gloves. If you take the scientist to be this archontic force, the tank to be our reality, and the gloves to be these bloodlines, that is the dynamic that we're looking at between this hidden force and the one we see. So what has been created is a hierarchy coming out of the hidden, down into the seen, to create and direct a society that generates maximum low vibrational energy and systematically imposes the virus upon our society more and more and more. And these bloodlines have a particular DNA. And what is DNA? It's an information field. And they, when they create hybrids and anything like that, they see it as a software program. They don't see it the way we see it. And so the reason that these bloodlines interbreed so incessantly, I mean, we see it with royals, but all these Eastern establishment families of the United States into banking and corporations, they interbreed just the same. It's to hold this information field, which has a certain series of personality traits which the archontic force wants in these hybrids because it makes them work on their behalf without any compassion or empathy or question in terms of the impact and suffering that they make people have. So this information field, this DNA, this hybrid, has the natural order traits that I talked in that wolf's image. It has them deleted. They have the ability to empathize deleted, the ability for remorse deleted, the ability to feel any emotional impact for what they do to others deleted. And what they are describing are psychopaths. These people are psychopaths in our reality on behalf of psychopaths operating outside our reality, because they are an expression of this. No empathy, no remorse, no shame. How on earth can you bomb the living shit out of Gaza and have no emotional impact? How can you lie to justify the invasion of countries that kill and maim millions? How can you do that? Only if you have no ability to empathize and you have no emotional consequence for your actions. So, you think politicians are on the world? No, it's something very different, which the major politicians are an expression of. Some know, many don't. And the reason that these hybrids are so, I'll call them the elite for want of a word, are so important is because there is a hybrid genetics. It means, because when you go back, genetics is just an information field, a frequency field. The frequency of the hybrid is closer to the frequency of the archontic entities than the general run of the human population. So the ability to possess, control, and dictate their behavior is far more powerful with the hybrids than it is with the general population that have a different genetics. And this is a Swiss clairvoyant called Anton Steiger, who was telling the story of his life in an article. He wasn't talking about any of this stuff. He was just saying experiences he's had. And this was one of them. He can see beyond what we call the physical into the energetic levels. When I see people in business or politics who are particularly trapped by the material world, for example, I notice that they no longer have any light bodies at all. In many of these people, the point of light at the heart chakra, here we go, which is otherwise always present, is no longer visible to me. What do we call psychopaths? Heartless people. Instead, I see something like a layer of shiny tar around them, in which a monstrous being in the shape of a lizard can be distinguished. When such people speak on television, for example, I see a crocodile shape manifesting itself around the person like a concave mirror. I don't see the light of their throat and forehead chakra. And I've talked to people all over the world that can see beyond the physical, who don't describe exactly the same, but it's very, very similar in terms of this possession. There you go, there's one of them, look. It's just a trick of the light, don't worry. So, what we're looking at is dual DNA in these bloodlines, which is what? Dual information fields, which will explain something else in a second. So these people appear to be one thing, but they're actually behind the facade of the human facade, something else. We're not from these parts. And if you look at it, that Avatar movie was symbolic in so many ways. What the American invaders did in the Avatar movie is they infiltrated the Na'vi, the blue people, by looking outwardly like the Na'vi. So they didn't realize they were being infiltrated. That's what's happening here. That's what's happened for thousands of years. We've been infiltrated. Absolutely, the descriptions of these entities and this inversion. And they're seeking to bring their reality into ours by syncing their frequency. The Golden Age society, the way it's described, and again in the way the Avatar movie portrayed that society, was a heart society. This was the point from which they interacted with the world, the heart, which allowed them to experience reality outside the bounds of time and space. When you come from the heart, you don't do hatred. The heart doesn't hate. The heart doesn't seek to destroy. And so this inversion was about taking the point of interaction with the world from the point of love, heart, into the emotions. And how do we see now our society and how people interact with it from the level of emotional response and emotional reaction instead of here? And when that moves to that we interact with the world here, the world dramatically changes. And so, like I said earlier, with this heart coherence with the central nervous system and the brain, once we get into this, we start to disconnect from the heart, disconnect from beyond time and space, and start to have this as the governor of our perception. And if you take it in a computer game terms, the idea is to pull us into the lowest level where this archontic force works from. Now, these Gnostic writings have been estimated to have been buried in that sealed jar between about 350 and 400 AD, which corresponds with the destruction of the Great Library of Alexandria run by Gnostic thinkers. But it's suggested that they were possibly written about 100 AD. In those documents, all that time ago, best part of 2,000 years, they say that the archons can take form, and the main forms they take are reptilian entities and those known today as greys. The archons describe the greys as like an unborn baby or fetus with grey skin and dark, unmoving eyes. That was nearly 2,000 years ago, and it's the same description as what we call grey entities today in the modern world. And of course, I've been saying for a long time now that behind the human networks of control is a reptilian form. But I did say a long time ago, I didn't think it ended there. I thought it went into the realms of something else, and this something else is this archontic inversion, I would suggest. So when I was talking about the reptiles, of course, I got lots of ridicule. Hey, he's mad. And my response to that has always been the same as well. This has been my feeling about what they say. Because I simply want to know what the bloody hell's going on, me. Just want to know what's going on. Whatever it is, I want to know. And if people don't like it, well, they do the other thing, that's just as good. But is it madness, or is it seeing beyond the program? Like I say, condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. But they say it's rubbish, but they don't investigate it. And yet, when the Daily Mail runs a story from some chemist, scientist, a few years ago, who said that he thinks from his research that there are reptilian entities all around in other dimensions, then he was treated as dead straight because he's a scientist, so he must know what he's talking about. And there was another study which was kind of projecting what some of the dinosaurs would look like if they hadn't been wiped out, as they say. And they came up with the fact that by now they would be humanoid reptilian entities like that, which is interesting because when you look at the descriptions around the world, this is a Zulu description, this is a painting made by a Spanish artist who said he interacted or experienced these reptilian entities. They are described in remarkably similar ways. And this is something called the Chani Project. And it's one of those kind of things that happen so often when I'm researching. I'll come to conclusions and I'll write it, and then something will come along and it will say, look at this. And long after I'd been writing about these reptilian entities, I read this article. I was in Nexus magazine, and it was by a whistleblower about a project called the Chani Project, Computer Interface Communication with Other Realms. And he said that in the 1990s here, 1994, for 5 years, they, at a kind of similar thing to what's happening at CERN, it was one of these collider things, but in Africa and smaller. For 5 years, they interacted through computer systems with an entity in another dimension, another reality, and asked a total of 20,000 questions. And interestingly, this is what came through this entity, according to this Chani Project. A reptilian race was holding back humans so they couldn't grow. The entity said they had fought many battles against the reptile race in their own reality. Humans were more evolved spiritually than the reptiles, but they suppress humans with their technology. Their God is their technology. That will become seriously relevant later in the day. But look, what did the Gnostics say? That humans have creative ability, where the archons don't. It says here, more spiritually evolved than the reptiles, but we are suppressed through technology. And what I was talking about, tuning humans into the fake reality, this brings us to endless stories of the manipulation of human genetics. Some appear in things like the Bible, but you find them all over the ancient world, again, relating to these gods of different names, which turn out to be basically the same. So in the Gnostic writings, they talk about, and remember, these have been in a sealed jar since about 350 AD. They've not been tinkered with and changed like the biblical texts that were expressions of these in many ways, but were out in the public arena and therefore could be changed. These have been sealed all that time. The Lord Archon, what they call the Demiurge, said, come, let us create a man according to the image of God and according to our likeness, that his image may become a light for us, a vehicle for us. And this brings us to the biblical texts, which again are mirrored all over the ancient world. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. And you know, in this Noah film in 2014, they symbolized the bloodline with the human finger and the reptilian covered finger. Very, very symbolic and very true. Now, anyone thinks that all this genetic stuff is modern. It ain't. This is known as the genetic disc for obvious reasons. It was found in Colombia, and it is thousands of years old. And on this disc, which is incredibly well preserved, are images of human eggs and sperm that can only be seen under a microscope. And it talks about the birth process internally as well as externally, and the entities that it is portraying certainly ain't human. And you've got the Zulu, Chitahuri, the children of the serpent, with Credo Mutra, who's right into his 90s now. And this is one of the paintings he did of descriptions of this Chitahuri. And on one of his ancient artifacts that goes back at least 500 years, called the Necklace of the Mysteries, these images, these symbols, are used by the Zulu shaman to tell the story of Africa and the story of the human story. And pride of place at the front is a non-human entity and a human woman. And let's say that fits into that. And this is one of the flying saucer type image at the bottom. And I asked him what that was. He said, that's what the stories say the Chitahuri came to Earth in. But this, he said, is symbolic of the interbreeding between humans and the Chitahuri to create a hybrid race. And This is the whole point. If you're at that level of understanding how reality works, you don't have to have literal interbreeding to change the human form into some kind of hybrid. You know, what we are doing is receiving and transmitting information. And if you change the information that the receiver-transmitter decoding system is receiving, and that information relates to the human form, you can mutate the human form simply through getting people to decode that information. You see, the reason that radio is part of one seamless decoding system. And so we are decoding from the waveform through the digital, I'll get to the digital in a minute, through to the holographic, illusory, physical. All these different levels, molecular and atomic and holographic as it is, and they're all different expressions of the decoding of this world. The world is a hologram. Everything that we see as form is a hologram. There's more to know even about that, but let's keep it at that level for now. And holograms are like, of the ones you buy in the shops, what they do is they get a laser, and the part of the laser goes off. It's a photographic print. Another part of the laser, in waveform, photographs the object, and then hits the part of the laser that came straight onto the film. And that collision creates what they call an interference pattern. What is an interference pattern in a hologram? It's waveform information. Looks like a fingerprint. I don't think it's an accident either. And then, well, what is it? It's just waveform. But then you fire a laser at it, and amazing things happen. And what you are looking at is basically the same principle as dropping two stones in a pond, and they start a wave reaction. And as those waves collide, what you're looking at is a waveform portrayal, expression, of where the stones fell, how fast they fell, how heavy they were. It's an information field if you know how to read it. And so what happens with the holographic waveform information is when it's read, it becomes an apparently three-dimensional object. These are all holograms that we're seeing here from these waveform information patterns. And some of them, the best of them, can look as solid as you and me. This lady is a hologram projected from somewhere else. These are all holograms. He's been projected from somewhere else. Les Dawson did a whole bloody program, you might have seen it, the British comedian. Even though he's no longer with us, great man as he was, he did a whole program as a hologram. This lady isn't standing there, but appears to be. And so what we're doing is taking this waveform information, that the cosmic internet, and turning it into a holographic reality. And now, mainstream science is starting to see that this is something they need to explore. You are a hologram projected from the edge of the universe. New Scientist, one of the main scientist magazines in Britain. Scientific American, are you a hologram? Quantum physics says the entire universe might be. And here is a mainstream newspaper report. Russian researchers want to replace your physical body with a holographic avatar. Why and how? Because they're replacing a hologram technologically generated with a hologram biologically generated, but even now they're starting to biologically generate as well. And the wonderful, amazing characteristics of a hologram, which explains so many mysteries, is that every part of a hologram is a smaller version of the whole. So when you get one of those holographic prints of a picture in waveform, and you cut it into 4, and you fire the laser at each one, you don't get a quarter of the picture, you get a quarter-size version of the whole picture. Every part of the hologram is a smaller version of the whole. And that's why you see the human energy field is a smaller version of the planetary energy field. This is where as above, so below comes from. And then you have reflexology and acupuncture and all these things that can find points on the ear and the body and the foot, all over the body, that correspond with other parts of the body. It's because they are holographic and therefore smaller versions of the whole. You might have seen people who've photographed things with their hands, where they've in various experiments that have been done. When I say photograph things, they've seen things with their hand. They've not seen them as clearly as with their eyes, but they've seen them. Now that is possible, although science says it's impossible. It's possible because there are sight senses in the hand, because it's a hologram, therefore all the senses are in the hand, just not as sharp as the main sense, in this case eyes. The palm reading is all part of the hologram because the whole body is in the hand. And this is why the brain cells and the universe mirror each other. So there are scientists over the years who have said that this reality as we experience it only exists when we observe it. I would take that a stage further and say we only see it in this form when we decode it. And the act of observation is the act of decoding. So when they say that waveform suddenly takes a particle form, or they can take the same form at the same time, it's because it's the same information in different forms. And so when you look at this newspaper article, Your Mind Can Control Matter, physicist, atomic particles were shown also to be waves. Whether they manifested as waves or as particles depended on whether someone was looking. Observation influenced the physical reality of particles. In more technical language, observation collapsed the wave function. It decoded the wave function into holographic reality. So when we are not looking at this reality, we're not decoding it, it's just a waveform information field. Same with us. So that's the base form of the body. It is an information field. We decode the body through into this as well. And if you can manipulate the way we decode reality, you can manipulate what we perceive. This is an example I've given many times, but I use it every time because it is so brilliant to explain what I'm trying to say here. There was a guy called Michael Tolbert. He wrote a brilliant book called The Holographic Universe about the scientific evidence for the holographic nature of what we call physical reality. And he told the story in that book of how he had a friend, his father rather, who had a party at his home, and he got a stage hypnotist along to do party tricks. And he got this guy called Tom, and he took him through the various things, and then towards the end he said, Tom, when I bring you back to a waking state, you're not going to be able to see your daughter in the room. So at that point he brings the daughter and stands her right in front of Tom. And Tom, the father's looking in her belly. So he brings him back to a waking state, apparently, and he said, Tom, can you see your daughter? Tom's looking around, can't see him. So everyone else in the room could see the daughter. He can't see the daughter. So the hypnotist went round her back, and the small of her back, he held something. He said, Tom, can you see what I'm holding? He said, well, you're holding a watch. Daughter's between him and the watch. He said, there's something on the watch, Tom, can you read it? He leaned forward, he read an inscription on the watch. Now, Dogma Dawkins and everyone else in the mainstream would say that's impossible, perfectly bloody logical. Because the base form of the daughter, like the base form of all of us, is a waveform information field. And if you don't decode that into the holographic reality, your holographic five senses can't see it because it's not in its reality. And so what had happened is the hypnotist had put, if you like firewalls in the decoding system, and the decoding system would not decode the energy field of the daughter. Everything else in the room, yeah. Not the daughter. Everyone else could see her because they'd not been through that process. So the only way that he could see his daughter is when that firewall was unlocked and suddenly he's decoding her. Oh, there she is. Now imagine you know all this in great detail and you want to manipulate the global population. What power that gives you. And look at how the same information is there wherever you look with people with an open mind. Tesla, my brain is only a receiver. Central American shaman, we are perceivers, we are awareness, we are not objects, we have no solidity. We are boundless, we, or rather our reason, forget this, and thus we entrap the totality of ourselves in a vicious circle from which we rarely emerge in our lifetime. And the whole focus of the system is make sure we don't emerge. Who creates the universe that we see? We do. And thus, if we change our perceptions, we can change what we decode into a reality, and we can change society. We're not going to do it by stockpiling weapons. We're not even going to do it by mass protests. We're going to be doing it by creating a different reality, by coming from a different perception of what reality is. All that we see or seem is just a dream.